Okay, I don't know whether you guys can actually hear me or not or see me. So, as Mark in the comments just said, he lives about probably half a mile from me, and we actually just ended up losing power literally about 3 minutes ago here, and it ended up restarting my computer and dropping our internet connection here. There's a major thunderstorm going on, so I'm not welding right now, and we're gonna go and see what happens here.
Hi everyone. Enjoy your Moxie. Where'd you put it?
All right, it's down there because
Okay.
I had already opened up the 7-Up.
Oh, okay.
I'll drink the Moxie.
Okay.
I love you.
Love you.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Have fun, everyone.
All right.
If I watch a movie, that's not gonna bug you, right?
No, well, just keep it low.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so we'll see what happens here. The thunderstorm is bouncing around and go from there. So I did discover something the other day, and I was thinking about it, and I decided we're going to bring it back to the live chats. So one thing that I used to go and do in the live chats before all of this stupid cornhole virus thing started was giving out stickers. So we're going to do a sticker giveaway later on in the live chat like we used to in the old live chat setup before all this stupid cornhole virus stuff started. So we got some questions coming in, so I'll just throw this up and out there. Basically, I don't mind if you ask questions about videos from the past or things that I'm working on. If it's something I'm currently working on for a project, like if you saw on Instagram, I just got done pulling the motor out of MudWizard in order to go and upgrade it. I'm not going to tell you what I'm putting in for a motor because it hasn't been released in video yet. I don't mind explaining why, but I'm not going to tell you what motor is going in because that kind of defeats the purpose of watching the video. Apparently, I have something growing on my hat there. Okay. So let's take a look at the questions and let's see what we got going on. Let's see. Do MTD and Cub Cadet tractors have electric PTO problems? Almost every tractor with an electric PTO at some point ends up with problems. And usually the problem isn't actually the electric PTO. Usually the problem is actually the safety switch, the engagement switch for it, ends up failing. So on most of your electric PTOs, there's usually a safety switch. There's usually one that's associated with the seat, and there's usually a second one that's associated with it being in forward, neutral, and reverse or something like that. And in that case, the PTO gets confused with the safety switch and then it won't engage correctly. Your PTO is nothing but just a 12-volt circuit. If you're having issues with your PTO, you're going to have one black wire coming out of your PTO and you're going to have a different color wire coming out of your PTO. Your black one is going to be your ground. Your other wire, which is usually either a gray or a brown, some of the cheap ones are blue. It's anything other than black usually. That one is your positive lead. You just plain give that 12 volts and it kicks over the clutch. If your clutch is working correctly, you can actually hear your clutch engage and click every time you give it 12 volts. The one thing that people don't realize and they don't understand also is that most of your clutches, if they have 3 exterior bolts on them, are actually tunable. If your clutch has just nothing but a singular center bolt, then it's not a tunable clutch. If your clutch has 1, 2, 3 around the outside with springs retaining it, then that is a tunable clutch. And you can actually set it to have different amounts of tension and different give or takes when you hit it. Obviously, if you tighten the bolts up, you tighten the clutch. If you release the bolts, you release the clutch. I've got a whole video that's on that. If you look it up on this Redneck Computer Geek channel, You can find out, I believe it's Testing Electric Clutch on a Mower is the title or something like that. It's either Testing the Electric Clutch or something like that on the channel. So there you go. You can look it up. Well, we're going to work on killing the... There, we'll put the obvious spam user in timeout for a while. There we go. Okay. Major Payne's Garage says, would you ever do an old Dynamark build? Major Benson Payne! That's a pretty good movie, actually. I like when he does the whole little engine that could thing. So, would I ever do a Dynamark build? I guess it depends on which kind of Dynamark we're actually talking about. If we're talking about the old school Dynamark that had the actual solid steel frame and something like that, the problem with builds like that as a YouTuber is that I tend to do builds where it's a generic machine that anybody can get a hold of. And I do that because of the fact it allows people to follow the build, to be able to build their own build, and then go out and have fun and do it. So as far as a Dynamark is concerned, if I got a hold of one that was in good condition but a blown mower deck and I had nothing else better to do, then I might build one just for the heck of it. The old Dynamarks, which had a 5-speed in them, are a really solid machine. Some of them even actually had 801s in them, which are actually a really solid transmission, but they've got the inner mounts instead of the outer mounts that we universally use now. And so they're hard to get parts for because they don't make them anymore. They were in the same series as the 820, and so they're a really solid transmission. I've actually got 3 of them here. As far as the stamped frame Dynamark, the one where the entire frame and the footboards and everything are all one unit, I probably wouldn't bother building one of those. The reason for that is because the stamped frames, you have to run square tubing down through them. You've got to run the tubing the entire length and everything else. By the time you reinforce everything, they're also notorious for having a really slippery clutch that doesn't take very well to mud mower builds. So then you've got to modify a clutch, which goes along with what Craftsman Crusher just asked. Why do you like Craftsman's to off-road? The reason why I like Craftsman's to be able to off-road is that a stock Craftsman, there is nothing that has to be done to the drivetrain to be able to take it off-road. The stock clutch, if you do a pulley flip on the motor and then you downgrade the pulley on the back to a 6-inch pulley, you put a 93-inch deck on and they run. There's nothing else you have to go and do to them. That's the reason why it is Craftsman's are the #1 thing that I end up recommending. The one thing about a Craftsman is that the clutch spring, the stock spring, works fine if you want to off-road in light mud. But if you want to off-road in heavy mud, like I prefer to do, you need to go and up the ante on the spring. And that's just as simple as grabbing a clutch spring out of an MTD out of the junkyard, or just about anything that'll overlay and pull it out and make it stronger. Let me see. What else do we got going on here? Are the new Cub Cadet models made by MTD? Anything that you see that has a FNR shifter, the little itty bitty shifter that only shifts about 6 inches or so, that is an FNR setup. It is an MTD design. Now, it really depends, and we're going to see this in a video that's coming up. I'm actually working on a drag racer build that's going to be based on the MTDs, but we're going to talk about the fact that there are different sizes of FNRs. So later on, I'm going to go and show you guys on the RCG Racing page. There's going to be a build I'm going to be doing for drag racing that's going to be an FNR based build, but it's going to show the fact that there are two different key sizes of FNR transmissions, and that's what you want to watch for. And we'll be showing that soon. Can you put dualies on your mud mowers? I put dualies on my Craftsman LT4000 mud mower. So the thing about dualies is that dualies, the reason for doing dualies is to be able to float up onto wide swaths of mud. That's the whole reason why it is you see dually tractors and dually trucks and dually all of that stuff. The whole point is to be able to float up on top. I don't care to float in the mud holes that I am in. My 12-inch wide bear claws, or 11-inch, they're 12 by the time you add the lugs. Those float way more than I need to most of the time anyway, so I don't need to go with dualies. Now, if I was, say, running 8-inch on the back, then yes, I could put 8s, I would dually them up, and I would end up with 16s in order to go and get a wide enough track in order to float on the mud and stuff. But as you've seen, when I drop it into the pond out here in multiple different scenarios, I'm usually able to go and float on the mud just good enough with the bear claws without being overly wide. I like the fact that the bear claws sit just wider than the fenders, and it gives the machine a little bit more stability without being too wide to go and fit the rest of the trail. The machines that I'm riding with right now are not as overly aggressively built as the Mud Wizard is, and so therefore being able to ride with them, if I was running dualies and I was ripping the whole trail apart at dually wide, would just be obnoxious. Not to mention up here in Maine, most of the riding that I do the entire time, even if I wasn't with machines that are stock geared, I still would rarely come out of third gear because it's all technical driving. That's the reason why it is in the last RCG Racing video, I included what was essentially about a 15-minute clip that I shortened high speed down to about 3.5 minutes. It shows the amount of technical driving that goes on in the trail systems up here in Maine. Most of our trail systems up here in Maine are more technical driving than they are high speed, unless you get on the really big ATV trails that are essentially just dirt roads for miles and there's no fun to them. Let's see, when you had your AMES mud mower with chain drive rear axle, did you build it or buy it as a mud mower? AMES mud mower. I'm not sure what it is that you're referencing. I built the hydro mower and I built the hydro. The only machine that I have owned well, actually, it would be almost 7 years ago now. I ended up owning a Lawn Chief, and the Lawn Chiefs actually use the double clutch assembly that all of the racing mowers are based on nowadays. In 1976 through about 79, Lawn Chief created its own series of machines that all used Peerless 700s. They all had a double clutch pulley setup that works like the racers use now, and basically is the double clutch system that everybody clones now. Thus the reason why it is that I always say that nobody actually created the double clutch. It actually is just a clone. I think that answers your question, but feel free to ask more if I didn't quite get the right machine. Let's see. Hunter says, I don't understand why someone would spam a small engine live stream chat. Like, why? The answer is because they think that guys like you can't get the ladies, and so therefore they put the catfishing ladies in here to spam. It happens about every third chat, usually. I end up with one or two. I can usually tell exactly when it is they come in. The tag icon for them will be obviously some Instagram model that they pulled, and, you know, it is what it is. Let's see. Okay, hey, let's have some fun so that I can come back down through, since we got about 27 people here. So here's my cash. It is 20s and 50s from my last tractor flip. I will tell you that the tractor started off as a $100 tractor. And how much money is there? My last tractor flip started off as a $100 tractor, and it was a black tractor. That's all I'm going to tell you in order to go and guess how much I sold it for. And then I'll tell you what it was in just a little bit if nobody manages to hit the dollar amount yet. Let's see. Carts and Cameras, spelt with a K, is a Peerless 920 oil or grease filled? I would say that unless somebody's actually torn it open and done something to it, it is most likely a grease filled transmission. The 930 and the 920 are both the same series, and 930 is grease filled if it's still original. The one thing I'll tell you is if it does have the original grease that came in those was caca. If you overdrive the pulley in those, you will smell it burning that grease out of it. It was horrible grease. Do not overdrive it without swapping the grease that's in it. It's not a good idea. I've actually heard of guys having it bubble and seize the bearings in the top and actually catch them on fire. You know, just a minor fire. I'm not talking all up in blaze or anything, but just a minor fire. Let's see. Hey, Neil, shout out from Florida. Good day to Florida. I've got a guy who follows me from the Keys down your way. Apparently they sell Craftsman. Apparently they sell Craftsman series tractors down in the Keys, and so he ends up sending me messages for his LT. I think it's an LT 2000 he's got down there. He's on an island that's only like 5 miles wide, but it's like 12 miles long or something. I'm not sure which island he's on. Josh, the inflatable and tractor guy. I'm not really sure what to think of that name, Josh. For a Husqvarna with a 48-inch deck tractor and a V-twin Briggs 24 horsepower, has compression, has spark, has fresh gas, won't start but keeps backfiring. How can I fix it? Could it be the wrong spark at the wrong time? So if it keeps backfiring is usually one of two things. Backfiring is usually either your exhaust valve is way out of tune or your flywheel key is snapped off. If I were you, the very first thing I would check is most likely your flywheel key. If you've got spark and you've got gas and you've got a backfire, then usually the next thing to go to is the flywheel key, which is the quickest to go and check. And then after that, to go and check your valve lash. Well, actually, valve lash is probably faster to check than your flywheel key. But those are the two things that I would check. Pretty much anytime you end up with a back blow into your carburetor, it's usually one of those two. Let's see. Let's see. My old Dynamark is the stamped frame and has so much flex in the clutch that that don't make much unless you slam with all your force. Yep, exactly. So if it's a stamped frame Dynamark, what the racers usually do with the stamped frame Dynamark is if you've got your stamp frame and you're looking at the bottom of it, and you've got your engine here, the rear of the frame here, and you've got where your foot sits here. What a lot of the guys will do is they'll actually put across the bottom of it, they'll put a 1-inch square stock steel piece right across there, and they'll bolt it directly through where the foot plates are, and then they'll put another one at the end of the foot plates, and that allows it so that it doesn't side flex as much. And what you can do with that is then you can weld a piece of square stock the entire length of it that runs down across those, and then bolt up through it on either end, and that gives you your flex rigidity at that point. And you can either do it by bolting, or if you think you're going to extremely flex it, I would weld it. "93-inch deck." Well, I need yes. If you have a 5.5-inch front on a stock AYP setup, if you have a 5.5 front, you have your stock clutch, and then you have your back is a 6 to a 5.5. It is a 93-inch belt that you need as far as an AYP setup is concerned. If you drop the back to a 5, providing you have a side shift, then it's a 92-inch deck, 92-inch belt that you end up using. Let's see. Josh, you're welcome. I'm glad I could help you with the PTO clutch question. I actually get that one a lot. I might have to revisit that video again. Oh, the tractor from when I was a kid. Yes, the tractor from when I was a kid was the style with the 600 that was in the center and went to a solid axle in the rear, because that was back when tractors had no safeties. They had no F's to give, as far as, if you were stupid and you managed to wind it up and flip the tractor and stuff like that. So it was a beast. Just as a stock tractor, it did all kinds of things. It had a 10 horsepower flathead in it, and it was the old style 10 horsepower flathead that actually had the pulley with the side cut in it, and you pull started it using nothing but a piece of rope. I love that machine. I beat the piss out of that thing for years. I'm not really sure when I blew it up. Actually, that was my first foray into the idea that I could fix a motor. I blew it up. I couldn't manage to get it to start. I ended up figuring out from some old timer that it was the head gasket that was blown. And I tore the heads off and I reground the heads, tried to put it back together. I never got that machine ever running again. At some point, my mom sold it out from underneath me. She sold it to somebody for God knows what. That was the habit my mom had. All right, so how much money is in the money stack? Let's go to that. Dun 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 dun. 370 is very close. Hunter says 500. I'm going to tell you that the statement there, Hunter, is that the machine was a black Poulan Pro. It was the bug-eyed Poulan Pro, and it had a 42-inch deck with a MST 206 in it and an 18 horsepower Briggs. $500 is what I would have marketed it if I had wanted to go and sell it in about an hour last year or so. I sold it for the amount I sold it for in an hour and a half. It took me an hour and 30 minutes to go and sell it for what I listed it for. $500 is what I would have sold it for quick sale last year. $600 is what I would have listed if I had time to sit on it. 320 is too low. 550 is probably a negotiation price I would have taken last year. 120 bucks is what I had into it when I sold it. Well, actually, I had about 130 into it when I sold it. So this is what I sold it for. Let's see, 650, too high. It was a Poulin Pro 42-inch deck. 400, Hunter gets it. There is 400 in that pile. That's 20s and 50s, $400. Good job, Hunter. So 400 was a quick fire sale just to go and get some money flipped in order to be able to go and get it done. Normally I would have listed that machine for a fire sale of about 500 bucks. The problem is right now, nothing is selling. If I list it for 500 bucks, I can only sell it for 400 at the very most. If I list it for 400, it'll sell for 300 at the most. So in last year's market, I would have listed the machine at $600, which means in this market, the best I could have hoped to sell it for was 500. So I listed it for it immediately sold. But, you know, that's just the way it is. Let's see. Do I prefer a side shifter or a nut buster shifter? I call them crotch shifters, but yes. As far see, what I call a nut buster shifter is I call those ones for the GT6000 where you have to actually lift down and almost punch yourself to either side when you want to go into reverse and second gear, I think it is, if I remember right. Those ones you almost punch yourself straight in order to be able to shift. Those I call nut busters. But as far as the under the crotch shifters, I actually like those better in deep mud. And the reason being is because what I've discovered with the side shifter is that the side shifter in really deep mud ends up getting mud up into it, and it does stupid things. If you get really hard packed deep mud up into the side shifter, it tends to have issues going into first and second gear from reverse because of the mud pack. So I don't actually like it. I'm in a debate about putting some sort of mud guard on the shifter, but that's a catch-22. Anytime you put in a mud guard, you potentially have an area that's going to go and catch the mud in order to pack in. And yeah, it's a catch-22 every time, because the problem with putting in a mud guard is that if the mud gets over the top of it, you end up with the problem you're trying to avoid, and it stays a problem. But if you have the problem of the mud coming up into it, then basically you just deliberately hit the next water hole that you can, and it flushes it out. So it's kind of a back and forth issue. Let's see. Jumping down through. Hunter says, yay, do I win the money? No, Hunter, you do not win the money. We just were having fun. Sorry, bud. Hate to go and hurt it. What I will tell you is that in a few minutes, we'll see if people want to go and win a few bumper stickers. How's that sound? We got 27 people. That's pretty good sitting around here. In about 10-15 minutes, we'll do the how to go and win bumper stickers. If you're new to the channel, the how to win bumper stickers is going to have to go and do with a way to get a hold of me. If you are old to the how to get bumper stickers, I'm going to warn you right now that I'm going to write down exactly what time that I say it. So if you decide to jump the gun and send me the how-to before the time is right, I will ignore that you existed. I'm just that kind of guy. Sorry. So jumping down to the next question. Are chain and wheel weights good for mud bogging? So as far as chain and wheel weights, I have kind of an odd thing to go and say about that. So the thing about chain and wheel weights is that if you're running turf savers, you're always going to get better traction over a stock turf saver tire with the chains on. That's the whole point of chains to begin with. As far as the wheel weights are concerned, the problem with wheel weights is the age-old mud bogging conundrum. Do I try to get over the mud and get traction to be able to paddle it? Or do I try to dig my way to the bottom of the mud and be able to hit the bottom and pull through it? That's the reason why I like running Bear Claws. Bear Claws are big enough that usually they paddle tire over the top of most bottomless mud pits. So if you're running wheel weights, you need to run wheel weights with tires that are cookie cutter. They need to be tires that are like 8 inches wide, thin tires, and you need an aggressive tread that is self-clearing, that's going to chew down through the mud until you hit the point you hit the bottom. And the problem with that is at that point you have to have enough ground clearance to be able to make the chewing. And that's where the term bottomless mud pit comes from. The term bottomless mud pit comes from things like marine clay here in Maine. It comes from red bogs that they have down south. It comes from bogs where if you try to cookie cutter chew through it, you're going to go and hit your differential, and you're going to sit on your differential because you plain just can't hit the bottom. Think La Brea tar pits type mud, where it doesn't matter what you do, you're stuck. They also refer to that up north as permafrost mud. If you're dealing with permafrost mud, you've got an upper layer that you want to float on top of. And that's another mud type situation where they end up using dualies. They'll end up on, that was weird. I just had a weird phone message come in. They'll end up on dualies that are able to go and stay up on top of the permafrost. Because when you're running on permafrost, once you break the permafrost layer, you're screwed. You're going through, and at that point it's bottomless. That's the reason why it is we call them morning skidder runs here in Maine. In the early spring, when the spring thaw happens, you end up with like a 50-degree temperature change here in Maine. So you end up with it being about 50 degrees during the day, and it ends up about 20 degrees at night. And what they do when they're running skidder is they will go out and they'll drive out on something like an ATV or something that'll make it out there, and they'll drive out and they'll drop trees. They'll just drop tons of trees all over the place. And then what they'll do is they'll run the skidder, but they run the skidder at just barely before sunrise, just as the sun is coming up. And then as the sun rises, they'll have about an hour worth of haul as much as possible all at once. And the reason being is because the moment the sun gets up to a certain point, all of a sudden it blows away the top frost and you sink. And you get below the permafrost layer, you hit the mud, and that's it. Even a skidder with 40, 44s, 50-inch tires, they will go straight to the differential, and that's the end of it. And then you'll end up with a skidder that has to wait until like 2 a.m. in the morning and hope that they haven't ended up freezing their chains into the frost to the point that they can't muscle it out. Let's see. Major Payne's Garage. I'm not quite sure I understand what it is you're asking for a question. How would you go about trying to find parts for a... Oh, you mean a 5-speed Dynamark rear end? You need to find out exactly what type of Dynamark, what type of rear end you have. Some of the Dynamarks had spicers. Some of the Dynamarks had 600 front loads. Some of the Dynamarks had 801s in them. You're going to need to find out what it is that you actually have in it. And then you're going to need to go and figure out whether you can actually still find out part outs. For example, most of the time, if you have 820s and you're looking for gears, you got to go and get on eBay. The same thing if you have a front load 600. If you had a spicer, on the other hand, spicers are still actually used up through into the, I think it's early 2000s. You can still find spicers in a lot of machines. The other thing is if it's got something like a Spicer 23 or a Spicer 3600, then you could actually upgrade it to a 930 or an MST. So you need to find out exactly what you have bolted in underneath it before you start actually hunting for your parts. Let's see. Jonathan Walters, I have one more question. I don't mind questions. Throw them out there. That's what this is for. I'm usually on here till about 7:30 or so. Well, 7:30 my time, which means I'm on here for another 50 minutes or so, unless this chat ends up dying off. So throw the questions up. That's what this is for. I like when we can interact and be able to bounce the chat ideas back and forth so that everybody gets their time. Let's see. So, question. My brakes on my Craftsman LT 4000 won't work. My brake pads and brake caliper are good. My brake rod is good, but I don't have my stock springs, the one on the rod and the caliper. Okay, so the one on the caliper is nothing more than just a return spring. So the one on the caliper, all you got to do is just put any generic lightweight return spring on it. And you can run that from the top of the caliper lever back to whatever the first thing is that you can hit with a light duty spring. Now, as far as the spring that is on the rod, which is what I'm assuming that we're discussing at this point. So okay, I need to find something to use as a, okay, I've got, here we go. So your caliper has a lever that comes up out of it, and your rod runs through that lever. Okay, so on the back side of this is going to be a washer and a cotter pin, cotter or a clevis pin, or whatever the stupid term is that I always get wrong and everybody puts in the comments that I'm an idiot. Anyways, whatever that thing is goes on that side. So from the top of that lever or the bottom of it, either one, you can put a pullback spring, and that needs to be a lightweight spring. On the other side, you've got your threaded rod side of it, okay? So this threaded rod decides exactly how hard that spring ends up pressing. So what you need is a compression spring on that side. My my thing that I don't usually end up going and releasing as a how-to thing is that the valve cover springs from a single cylinder Briggs & Stratton, if you do this long enough, you inevitably end up with several blown single cylinder Briggs & Strattons because they love to throw the stupid rods in them. and they just toaster strudels the interior, so you end up with valve covers one right after another. If you need a spring to go and use in a hurry, the spring from a valve cover will actually fit here if you crank this all the way down on the threaded rod portion. So that spring there will fit, but basically any compression spring that you can get. You need a press-in compression spring. So you got a pull spring on this side, just a lightweight one. You can buy generics at the hardware store. And then you have a compression spring on this side. And most of your hardware stores will carry a generic set. If I remember right, these are 4 inches by 3/4 inch, if I remember right, for the size. And they're nothing special. Just even a valve cover spring will work. The problem with valve cover springs is that they're not coated because they're in the oil, and the oil ends up eating the coating, so they're uncoated. So if you use those, they flash rust really fast, and they end up rusting away. So don't use it on a customer's machine, but if you need to get it built in order to be able to test drive it, you need to be able to use it yourself on the weekends or something like that, a valve cover spring will work. Just crank it all the way down through. Okay? And if you have any more questions on that, you're welcome to go and email me. Actually, while we're at it, for the email time, we're going to write it down right now. It is 6:41 right now. We're going to write down the time. The reason being, if you are somebody who is new to the chat, the first, let's make it 5. The first 5 people that are able to follow directions and not be stupid, that can send me a email. The email is Maine. Maine is in the state. M-A-I-N-E, mud, M-U-D, mower at yahoo.com. Maine mud mower at yahoo.com. You must have your name and your mailing address, and it must arrive after the time of 6:41 Eastern Time in order to go and get yourself a free sticker. I'm not going to go and be like other YouTubers that seem to think you should pay for stickers. I will send you a free sticker in the mail. Yes, if you are from Canada. If you are from Canada, fine, I will eat the dollar to go and send you an extra a sticker. For some reason, Canada cost me like $2.50 to go and send you guys a sticker. I tell you what, if you're one of the first 5 people to go and send me an email, you have your name, your address correctly, and it shows up after the time I just declared, I will send you a sticker even if you're in Canada. Heck, if you're one of the guys who logs in here from Berlin, I will send it to you. There's a guy who logs in occasionally from Germany. I will figure it out. If you send me your address correctly, I will figure out how to send you a sticker. I don't make you go and eat the cost of sending the stickers like some other YouTuber does. Okay, let's see. All right, so Craftsman Crusher, I'm just wondering why didn't you try to rebuild the original Maine Mudmower? So the original Maine Mudmower, when I tore it down, was on its 5th or 6th transmission. It had been plowing my driveway consistently for 4 years. It was on its 3rd motor, and the entire frame from one corner to the other was tweaked over 1.5 inches. It literally rode with the front tire sitting slightly off the ground on the right-hand side. That's how badly the entire front end was tweaked. It was just, the entire frame was tweaked. The other thing is I didn't want Maine Mudmower associated with another YouTube channel, because unfortunately, because Maine Mudmower is in the search criteria for his videos, it actually ends up coming up with his videos instead of my videos if you search Maine Mud Mower. So it was pointless to continue having the machine underneath that name. Plus the machine just, it needed to be rebuilt and it needed to be redone and it needed to start life over. So rather than try and untweak a 1.5-inch tweak in the frame, and plus I had bent, cut, re-welded the front frame rail on it twice. It was done. It needed to go away. So it was time to move on. Let's see. Hunter says, I see it's a 7-Up today. Yep, it's a 7-Up today. And I've got a Dr. Pecker also sitting here because of the fact that I need to go and have some caffeine because it's been a long day. I've got to get up tomorrow and I got to get as much fabrication as I can done before I end up going to go get John. And, well, Jesse and I will end up going to go get John. And hopefully pretty soon I've got a really big addition to the channel coming in. I'm not going to give away what it is yet because unfortunately the way this stupid cornhole virus has been, there's been tons of delays in getting stuff and ordering things and getting things delivered. But there is a really big upgrade to the channel that is showing up that I can't wait because it means RCG Racing is going to really be able to do a lot of things. So yeah, I'm so psyched. I can't wait to go and show you guys what's showing up. Yeah. Anyways, sorry, I got really giddy. I'm so happy. I can't wait. Hey, did you guys go and see the Instagram and the community page photo that I posted up? The motor is out. The motor is out of Mud Wizard, and we're looking towards an upgrade. So the last, I see that you guys have been posting up some questions. I'm going to come back to them as soon as I finish what I'm talking about. So the Mud Wizard, the last time that we were out on the trail, I started to have this odd situation with it where as I was running it along, it hit the point where like it would semi-stall every time I came down on the idle. And then it would semi-stall some more as I came down on the idle. And I kept having to redline it straight up through just as hard as I could. And then it would clear. And then I'd drive down the trail for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then it would start having issues with idling along. And I'd have to redline it again. And at first I thought it was a carb problem. But then I started to smell something that I really was not happy to smell. And so we stopped. And I ended up checking the motor oil that was in it because I smelt something that was not a good smell. And I checked the motor oil, and wouldn't you know it, there was no oil in it. So I managed to go and get some oil put into it. We ended up finishing the trail ride. I continued to have more and more issues, and the further along that we went, 2 hours later into the ride, the entire engine smelt of burnt transmission. If you've ever been drag racing, if you've ever been to mud runs, if you've ever smelt when an automatic transmission ends up burning clutches and overheating and stuff like that, the whole entire motor now, if it runs for more than about 15 minutes at a time, starts to have issues. It starts to go and smell like a burnt transmission. And for anybody who's been around these Briggs & Stratton singles, Usually that is the piston rings are starting to go, and they start to score the cylinder, and eventually they end up seizing the head and they blow. So at this point, it is eating oil, and it is not the head gasket. It's got compression. I checked the compression to make sure it wasn't a head gasket, and it wasn't just pushing the oil up through into the PCV valve. So that poor junkyard motor has finally ended up hitting the end of its life. But when you consider that I have put that motor underwater, I've put that motor underwater 3 times in its life. I have been through 3 carburetors with it. I have flooded it with gas. I have mutilated spark plugs in it. I have put 2 head gaskets in it. It's time. It's time to move on. So I've got something new in it, and we're gonna be going to an entirely different way than we usually have with the mud mowers. If you've been around and you've seen the mud mowers for a while, you know that I have a certain saying when it comes to mud mowers and engines. I guess it's time to change that. And I'll explain why in the video that's going to be coming out on RCG Racing. That's why I got to get that done as quick as I can, because unfortunately with RCG Racing, I have to keep John out of the videos other than a passing thing because of the way YouTube does its monetization and comment ratings now. Because if you focus on children, it classifies you as a kids channel, which is what it did to Redneck Computer Geek. All right, so let's see, Jonathan, caliper, I stripped the transmission just right so I don't have to push the clutch in for the brake or to change gears. To how I stop is by going down to first gear slowly, then in neutral. Oh, so you're engine braking. Well, there's nothing wrong with engine braking nicely. Just keep it nicely engine braking. The problem with engine braking is that, like anything, engine braking ends up pushing your clutch. And so if you're nice to it, then you don't burn your clutch setup out. In the case of a tractor or a mud mower or whatever it is you want to call it, your failing point in your clutch system is your belt. So if you continuously engine brake and you're not careful about how you're doing it, you're going to end up eventually burning your belts up. So just be careful with that. All right, Bayside Customs. Can you put a car battery in a lawn tractor without having any problems, or will it fry something? That's actually a really good question. And the answer to your question is, you can fry something, but it's what you already could have fried if you were being belligerent. That's a nice, polite way to say it. If you have a car battery, your car battery has significantly more cranking amps than a lawn tractor battery does. Your average lawn tractor battery is about 250 to 300 to 420 on the really big ones. Like Mud Wizard, for example, because I have a 2,000-pound winch on the front, I run a 420 cranking amp battery, which I have figured out will run the winch for roughly about 15 minutes and still leave me enough cranking capability to get the machine started in order to recharge the battery. That's the reason why it is that I upgraded to the 420 cranking amp. But for most situations, unless you're running a large V-twin, the 300 and the 250 work perfectly fine. Now, to follow up on your question, your cranking amp affects your starter. Your starter on your lawn tractor is your next weak link when it comes to your cranking amperage. Your solenoid doesn't care. I have literally taken the $15 Stens solenoids, and I have started plow trucks using them in the past. The F-150s and the F-250s out of the 90s, they use standalone solenoids that are up on the side of the engine bay, and you can take a positive inlet Stens starter solenoid off of a Craftsman lawn tractor or an older Agway or something like that, and you can put it in a truck and you can start it. It isn't going to pass as many cranking amps as a full-size vehicle one will, but it will start it a few times. With that being said, they're rated for roughly, my guess is probably about 500 to 600 cranking amps, which in a pinch will definitely get the truck started. But if you continuously were to use one, you would fry it. Going back to the lawn tractor, that means that you have upgraded from 250 to 300 cc's of cranking amp to hitting your starter on that engine with 500 cc's. Your motor is going to turn over way faster. Your next thing that is going to be a problem is that if your valves go out of adjustment, your cranking amp on a lawn tractor battery, once your valves go out of adjustment, is not enough to force the valve and override it. On the other hand, a car battery will, plus overheating your starter, which means eventually you will burn out your starter and you will eventually slam a valve to the point that you blow up something else. And that is exactly the reason why it is that you need to be careful if you install a car battery. I do not recommend going over 500 cranking amps for the exact reason why it is that I just told you about starting a truck using a single positive in Stens starter solenoid for a lawn tractor. Can you do it once or twice? Yes. Should you install it in a daily driver in order to try and go somewhere? No. It is only a plow truck solution or a yard truck or a farm truck. Do not do it and go out on the road. The other warning that I have discovered recently in the past couple of years is that if you have a large cranking amp lawn tractor battery and it was on a machine that was a small engine, they put lower quality starter solenoids in those machines. If it was a machine that had, say, a 13 or a 14 horsepower or a 12 in it, those machines have crummier starter solenoids. And I've noticed this in Poulin Pros consistently. The Poulin Pros that have 15.5s in them have way crummier starter solenoids. And if you put in a really good cranking amp battery, it'll actually short them solidly in the on position. So you need to be careful of that also. Buy a good quality solenoid. Do not ever skimp on solenoids. They are just not worth it, because if you save yourself, it's not worth it, because if you save yourself $10 buying a solenoid, you cost yourself potentially a $50 starter or slamming a valve and dropping it into your motor in order to save $10. You're saving 10 to fry 50, or worse yet, blow a motor. Don't ever do it. Buy a high quality solenoid always. Let's see. Major Pain, how's Rust to Red coming along, and do you have any plans on a lift? So as far as Rust to Red is concerned, Rust to Red's going to go and get pulled in order to work on really soon. I need to get Jesse's truck done first because it's the easiest one to get on the road to have a third vehicle. So that's going to be high priority. I am building Mud Wizard right now to go drag racing on Saturday. So once I get done with the drag racing on Saturday, then I'm going to be working on getting her truck up and running. And then after I get her truck onto the road, then Rust to Red's going to be coming in. Rust to Red is actually a stock factory lifted Ford Ranger. So I'm not worried about lifting it. It's actually factory lifted 4 inches. So if you sit it next to my Ranger with the same tires on it, it sits factory 4 inches taller, and it is blatantly obvious. So you guys have all seen the overhead light bar and the headache rack that I have on my Silver Ranger. The blue, well, bluish purple something or other that the 4x4 Ranger is. It actually sits only about an inch lower than that headache rack. I think I've decided at this point I'm going to make a longer flatbed, and I'm going to beaver tail it towards the end of it when I come off of the flatbed, because I've got to make up for that 4 inches in some form if I'm loading stuff onto the back. I want to go and I definitely want to extend it, because machines are getting consistently bigger than I'm picking up. A lot of the yard tractors, the lawn tractors now, are a good solid like 6 inches longer now. And so if I put them in the bed the way it currently is set up, there's only about 4 inches to the center of where the tire sits in the rear. And that's really not that much if you hit a really bad bump to bounce it back. So yeah, we'll see what happens as far as that goes. Let's see. Aaron Lyon. I apologize if I managed to go and butcher your name. Between my Maine accent and bad English, I'm sorry. Aaron Lyon. I'm from Scotland. Cool. I hope we have our own Loch Ness myths over here in the United States, actually, not far from here. Over in the lakes in Canada, there's a Loch Ness monster type myth. Sorry, my bad. Got sidetracked there. I'm from Scotland, and me and my mate have just built me a Contrax mower with a 14 horsepower V-twin. I got it all running. What would you suggest doing first? Has good tires and a locked axle. Has good tires and a locked axle. So I guess my next question to you would probably end up being define your good tires. Oh, what's the animal in the thumbnail? The animal in the thumbnail is a ferret. Jesse and I ended up with 2 ferrets. We've got an albino and we've got a black-faced one. Maybe if you guys, maybe if we bug her enough, maybe she'll go get one to go show you guys. She's in the other room behind me. We'll just yell at her a couple of times. Maybe she'll go grab one. Honey! It didn't work. She's zoned out. She's watching a movie.
Oh, shut up.
Oh, I got an oh, shut up. Honey, they want to see what the animal in the thumbnail is.
You don't have an albino. It
Oh,
doesn't have red eyes. It's just white.
Oh, it's
and
just white with a couple of black spots. Sorry, it's not albino. My bad. My bad. My bad.
And that one's eating.
All right. Let me see. Okay, so as far as your question about what to do next, I apologize. I got sidetracked. For some reason, that comment caught my eye. So
Come here.
as far as what to do next, one of the biggest things that I always recommend, yeah, okay, apparently the albino is, or the white one is eating. So there's the black ferret. And they're young, so they're very nippy.
They're 10 weeks.
And they're 10 weeks old. And if you're dealing with ferrets when they're really young, they're very nippy, and it's just part of their like experimenting phase. And you got to be really careful with kids and stuff like that, and just to let them pet them and get used to their scent, because they're very scent based. And I can't let him run around on the keyboard or anything because he has a habit of messing up my menus and stuff.
You go, Daddy.
Let's see. So, oh, here we go. We got the other one. Whoa, hey, you. Ah, okay, nope, over here. Okay, no, let go of the. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Oh, that was hospitable. Apparently, they wanted the AutoZone ad. Okay, so,
You didn't show the white one.
I did show the white one, or didn't I?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so
Whitish gray.
So the whitish gray one is about 16 inches or so long, I'm going to guess. And that was what I was about to go and say as far as your upgrades and stuff. One of the biggest problems that I see as far as people upgrading their mud mowers is that, no, you need to take them. Ah. There you go. Yeah.
Hi, babies.
There. Okay, well, now that I got ferret, goober, snot, something or other in my beard. So one of the things when people end up upgrading their mud mowers is the very first thing that they always end up doing is they do rear tires. And the problem is you can't do your rear tires without dive nosing your front. And if you're still on the stock 12-inch tires, you're dive nosing down into everything. So if you upgrade to, say, let's say you go from 16, 18-inch tires to, say, 22-inch mud tires, which is what most people do, then you need to take your front tires and you need to make sure to upgrade your front tires by just as much, if not more. So if you have 22s in the back and you have 13s in front, you really need to go to 16s, and that will re-level the machine. Yeah, that's usually the equation at that point. It's usually 22s match to 16s, and usually 24s and 25s will match closer into the 18s.
We need to get more duck soup tomorrow.
Okay. And 25s and 26s, you can run a 19, but you've got to go and you can run a 19, but it's going to sit slightly back. So that's the big thing that I see a lot of people do. They do rear tires, but then they end up with a dive nosing front end. The other thing that I see a lot of people do, and yet again, it's another front end thing, is go online and look up mud skimmers. Look up mud skimming trucks, look up mud skimmers, and look up the front ends on pre-runners and stuff like that. Those skid plates that go down in the front of those trucks or of that design type truck, you need to design something like that that brings the front end down and underneath your front axle, because you've got to come down about an inch below your front axle, because that is your lowest point, and that is a solid right angle. So if you slam into something with a solid right angle, then you're going to solidly stop. But if you hit something with a slight angle on it, you're going to come up and over it and skim across it. So that's the next thing that I definitely would pass on to somebody is mud skimmers, mud skimmer trucks, and pre-runners. Look at the way their front ends are and the way that they bring everything underneath the front axles. It's a really, really major part of mud mowers that people just do not understand. They do not get. And it really honestly is part of the reason why it is that my machines, even when they were solid axle front ends, would make it further in a lot of mud holes than other YouTubers that I was riding with at the time. Let's see. You should manual swap the 4x4 Ranger. I'm debating it, actually. I like driving a manual a lot better than I do driving the automatic, so I probably will at some point end up doing that. Let's see. Thanks for the idea with the front end loader. I have to try this soon on my ATV. I like your videos. Thank you very much, Robert. If I had to pass along anything on that front end loader, the second video of it, I talked about it, but I'll pass it on as a quick little tidbit. If you've got the front end of the loader and you've got the bottom of it and you got your back here, the piece of frame that comes down and pivots with it, when it comes down and it hits into the ground, you want that as straight as possible when you're on a level flat surface so that it drives down in or just a little bit kicked up. And the reason being is because what I discovered was that if it was slightly down, then it would create a breaking point where it would go like this, and it would end up shearing it. But if I had it so it was like this when it hit, then it would level the bucket down in just a little bit and dig in and take a scoop. So that's my thing that I would really pay attention to when you're doing that, is try to keep that as in line as possible with the base of it, which is where most of your impact is, and do your best to make sure that that pivot point is slightly up or in line when you're hitting on a flat surface, or just a little bit in. You want it to scoop down in. You do not want it to scoop that way. I actually broke the hinge twice before I learned that. So I'm passing that on to you so that you don't have to go through breaking yours, hopefully. Let's see. Rally Man, how's it going? Sorry I missed quite a bit. Only home from work. Tonight's lawnmower. It's going good. The new motor is in the it's in the Mud Wizard right now. I'm not going to say what it is. I will say that the suspension needed a significant amount of messing around with, and I don't like the way that I have the suspension now set up, so something's going to happen. But I need the rig ready to go drag racing, and so at this point it's going to be whatever it is I can put together in order to be able to go and make it into the drag races on Saturday. So the old motor is out, the new motor is in, it's bolted in place, the clutch is all set up. I need to finish the wiring harness bolted up to the push button in the kill, and otherwise than that, I should be able to take it for a test drive tomorrow at some point. And then we get to monkey around with a little bit more and see what we can come up with. And the good news is I've got a few different belts on hand right now in order to play with a few ideas. So we're going to see what we can do. Hey, here's a comment debate for you guys. Apparently, If I show up there in order to run the Mud Wizard, I will be the only lawn tractor that shows up with a locker in the rear end. What do you guys think of that? This group apparently does not run any, none of them out of like 30 tractors run a locker of any kind to go drag racing. I found that a little weird considering I've been around drag racing since I was a little kid. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think a lawn tractor, in order to go 150 feet, requires having a locker? Feel free, throw some comments down, because Mud Wizard's going to have a locker, whether anybody else does or not. Is what it is at this point. Let's see. Josh says, spoiler alert, I bought 2 10 horsepower diesel engines, and they will be here this weekend. One will be going into my 69 MTD 860, and the other will be going into my Bohlins 1050 that I will also be getting. Sweet. I love the diesels. I think the diesels are a great idea. They just don't turn, and they smell good, according to Jesse. I love the 10 horsepower diesels. I think they're getting way more reasonable in price. I'm looking at a couple myself as far as the ideas that I have coming up. You know, unfortunately, the problem is, though, you put a diesel into anything, and next thing you know, you got to go and see somebody else's name showing up in the comments. So if I put a diesel in anything, it's going to be interesting what I put a diesel into. But yeah, we'll see what we can do. I'm debating the 10 horsepower diesels over more and more readily at this point. Let's see. Wrong turn looking hat. Actually, it's a Pendleton. It's Australian, and they're actually made in, let's see if it'll zoom in. There. They're actually made in Portland, Oregon. It's a Pendleton. They're Australian designed, and if you're interested, there's the model. You can order them off of Amazon. They're called an Australian shepherd's hat or an Australian cowboy hat. They're entirely waterproof, and they're waterproof to the point made of, I forget what they're made out of, but they're waterproof to the point that you can literally scoop water and drink out of it. You can water your horses, you can whatever with it. And what I like about it is that even when it's insane temperatures out, I can literally take the hat and I can dunk it in water, soak a little tiny bit in, and throw it on my head, and it keeps me nice and cool. And the hat actually, as the water evaporates off of it, acts exactly like when your skin sweats, and it cools the fabric, which cools your head. So even though it's a black hat, if you deliberately get it wet, it actually cools you instead of overheating you. Just a little trade secret. Besides that, it looks absolutely amazing. No, not really. Anyways, moving on. The Ferret Wizard. Actually, my parents actually used to illegally raise ferrets. So, story time. When I was growing up in the state of Maine, it was in the progress of becoming illegal to breed ferrets in the state of Maine when I was growing up. So what my father actually used to do was he used to drive to Massachusetts, and I was probably about 10 years old. Well, when this started, I was actually about 5 years old. Um, but when I was about 8 years old, my parents ended up pulling me aside and telling me I was no longer allowed to tell friends that we had ferrets up until I was about 10 years old when we finally got rid of the ferrets. And the reason being was because when I was 8 years old, Maine passed a law that had to do with exotic animals. And it was illegal to breed ferrets in the state of Maine. And so what my father used to do was he actually used to drive to Massachusetts in order to get ferrets, in order to breed the ferrets with our breeding pair of ferrets, um, in order to have new DNA stock, in order to sell the ferrets at campgrounds and stuff. It was literally like doing drug deals with ferrets. We would actually go camping at places, because ferrets back then were worth like $100 a piece. And so, and this was back in the 90s. And so we would literally breed the ferrets, and then we would go to campgrounds, and we would put the word out kind of in the in the back burner, in the backwoods, in the back something, or in the background, to people that we knew that we were in the campgrounds, we had ferrets, and they were in our pop-up camper. And my parents would sell out 3 or 4 ferrets while we were camping to make $300 or $400. And the campgrounds only ended up costing back then camping was really cheap. It was like $6 a night at most campgrounds if you had a pop-up trailer. So you could go for a week or 2 weeks of camping. You could sell one ferret, which literally paid for the entire time you were out camping. Plus you sold 2 or 3 more, and then they were all cash transactions, and we went home to nobody ever knowing where we lived. And so we illegally sold ferrets for 2 years, camping. And I remember that as kids, and it was really interesting to watch my father do some side deals, illegal ferret sales. Um, it's one of the happy memories, even though it's not legal, of my father growing up. Let's see. Hunter says, you look like a wizard with that hat. I guess you're perfect for Mud Wizard. So which one is better for looking like a wizard? Wait a minute. Here we go. We can do the debate. So hat number one. Yeah, Jesse says I'm running a fashion show. Or if I take the stupid leaves off of it, hat number two. So we've got kind of the Harry Potter wizard style. Or we've got more of the Louisiana cowboyish, So I don't know which one's more wizardish. I mean, maybe I'll have to go and wear the wizard hat when I go and take the Mud Wizard for a test drive when I get done putting the new motor in it. Only we're not going to go and put the new motor into the pond just yet. We're going to save the new motor to go drag racing Saturday. Then maybe we'll take it into the pond. I'm sure that that'll be the next thing I'm going to have to deal with. All right, let's see. All right, Robert says, thanks for the tips. Glad I could go and pass on some knowledge. I mean, after 8 years of doing this, I should hope I know one or two things. But then again, I'd have to be pretty dense not to. I mean, you know, I could always just make a snorkel that I tell you guys about and then forget to hook it up and hit a mud hole. I mean, that'd be a good idea too. Let's see. Let's see. I take it there's going to be video of the drag strip. Locker could cause drag or else go boom. Yeah, there will be video at the drag strip. I'm going to make sure that I have both my I'm going to make sure that I have my GoPro ready. I'm going to make sure that I have my other camera available. I'll have my cell phone, which is capable. I've got 80 gigs worth of free space on my cell phone, which means that I can literally shoot close to 8.5 hours worth of footage, give or take a little bit, somewhere between 8 to 10 hours worth of footage with 80 gigs worth of free space. So I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get plenty of footage. I'm going to make sure I go and take a charging pack with me so that I don't kill the cell phone in the middle of everything, and we'll go from there. So I need to get fabricating now that the thunderstorm has passed so that we can be able to get Mud Wizard up and running. So I'm going to answer a couple more questions, and then we're going to call it good as far as this live chat is concerned. It's been a really good live chat. I really appreciate you guys coming in. We'll answer a couple of more questions, and then I'm going to go and go from there and go see if I can get Mud Wizard put back together the rest of the way here.
No, you're going to eat supper first.
Jesse says I have to eat supper first, then I'm allowed to work in the garage. You know, got to do what the lady says. Let's see. Jack Russell Farm says, I just dropped an R6 engine in my GT1000, got it up to 93 miles per hour. Interesting. You'll have to go and send a video to me of that, and I'll post it up. Let's see. Hi from the UK. See, I told you guys, the guys from the UK always stop in. There's usually a gentleman who stops in from Berlin. We've got a bunch that have started coming in from Scotland. I just received a bunch of Facebook messages on the Redneck Computer Geek Facebook page. You're welcome to send me a message on anytime. I check it 2 or 3 times a day. I just got messages from Germany the other day. You know, we're going international with this thing. Wicked good. Let's see. Cool Bag of Doritos says, I'm guessing the new engine is going to be V-twin. Well, let me just say, I had to move all of the suspension setup. It's going to be something. Could you eat cereal out of the hat? You know, I imagine you probably could eat cereal out of the hat, but I'm pretty sure it would taste really weird and not be a good idea. You'd have to wash the hat consistently afterwards. Let me see. Thank you for the suggestions on the rear tires. Our chevrons, I believe they are 18 8.5. If they're 18 8.5s, then I would probably look into 16s for the front if you can find them. Just keep in mind that front end is your dive point. So if you make something that brings you up and over obstacles and you up the tires enough to go and get that rolling incoming angle, because that's the other thing that people don't realize is that a tire has a certain incoming angle where it becomes a 90-degree stopping point. So if you have your tire and you have your center point here, and you come over 90 degrees, you hit your 90-degree stopping point, which means anything that hits there and above becomes a solid wall hit. So when you increase the size of your tire, you raise that 90-degree point. And it doesn't seem like 13 inches to a 16-inch tire would mean as much as it does, but trust me, it makes a huge difference when you're off-roading a mud mower, having that difference. The stock tires that are on the machine that Jesse just got running, those are 16-inch GT tire rims. And if you watch her running versus the stock tires that are on the black and red tractor that Garrett drives, Garrett has better tires, but she makes it just as far on that machine in the mud hole. And the reason being is because those bigger front tires roll over stuff, and they get her significantly past the obstacle before she ends up hitting enough in order to dredge down the machine. That is the biggest thing that people do not put money into or upgrades into. That is the number one reason why they bog, is take the time to do that upgrade and get your exit point from the mud hole up just a few inches. Giant difference. Okay, so I need to be wearing hat number 2 at some point while I'm driving the Mud Wizard in the next video. Okay. I will try to remember that. I will try to go and make sure to go and wear the hat. We'll see if Jessie reminds me. It's her fault if I forget. Just so everybody remembers. Oh, shit.
Don't forget about Sensi and Color Street.
Oh, Jessie wants to go and put a 5 cents worth of closing in here that she is now selling the women's products of Sensi, and she's selling the Color Street nail stuff. So if you follow my Instagram, you'll see that she's tagged in a few different things, and you're welcome to go follow her. She'll be selling Sensi products, and she'll be selling the Color Street nails. Jessie works alongside me in the shop and stuff like that. I tell you what, if you're sick of listening to your woman talk about her fingernails and scratching up the paint and stuff like that, those Sensi nails, they put up with her working in the garden and working with me next in the shop. So I'm sales pitching the fact that they're worth buying for your woman. They are definitely worth it. She had a series of them on for almost 2 weeks helping me, and didn't have to change them out or anything, except for the fact that her fingernails grew out and they needed to be redone. Definitely sales pitching those. They're worth it. They they're in the category of to politically correctly say to make her quiet. We all know what I just said there. Okay, guys, well, there's a rumble in the background. I'm going to go try and finish some fabrication if the thunderstorms will go away. Everybody have fun. Stay out of trouble. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.